thank you very much for joining us today. Can I just kick off by asking that, given the state the NHS is in, it's crumbling under the Conservative government, if the Tories win in 2020, do you think the NHS will be recognisable after that election?
I genuinely don't, and I think you have to be very careful about scaremongering on the NHS. So I give that answer cautiously, but it's based on the experience that we have had in North West London of the biggest hospital restructure, in other words, closure programme, there's ever been in the history of NHS. And that programme itself, although it hasn't succeeded so far, has been the basis for what are called the sustainability and transformation plans across the country, which we've seen just very recently are going to result in major downsizes and closing of hospitals, of services and of beds. So no, I think that there's a long-term programme of decline in the NHS, which is probably linked to bringing in private sector providers. But I can be as sure as I can be of anything that the NHS, if the Tories had it till 2025, would not resemble anything we know now.
We've got an ageing population with increasingly complicated needs. How can Labour develop a policy and a strategy to ensure we can keep the NHS free at the point of use and a policy that will win for the next election?
Well, there are some good ideas out there. They include the integration of social care and health services, which relieves things like, in the unfortunate terminology, bed blocking, which gets people more appropriate and actually more cost-effective levels of care, and about ensuring that both preventative care, community care and primary care, GPs particularly, are dealing with a lot of issues that currently go into hospital services. So none of those, none of those is in any way actually controversial. They're very difficult to achieve, and they need a government that's committed to the NHS to do that. The problem is we also need continuing investment in acute care, and you cannot in any way diminish the level of acute care. In fact, it probably needs to go up in the short term until those other building blocks are in place. And that's the real problem. It's not necessarily the diagnosis of the problem that the government has got wrong, it's the execution of what they're actually doing.
So, housing is one of your briefs. You're a London MP. People in London need to be earning at least £100,000 to even think about getting on the housing ladder. How can Labour offer a viable housing policy to help get people on the housing ladder without encroaching on the green belt any further?
It's extraordinary in a way that the London housing market functions even as well as it does. It's a terribly dysfunctional thing for the reason you've given, and the problem is none of the three main constituent elements is working. So there's been an actual long-term decline in the number of social housing units owing to not just not building them but through sale and not being granted in planning consents. The private rented sector has gone up by default because the other two sectors have gone down, but the prices and the conditions are the worst, really, that we've seen for a very long time, in terms of affordability, but also conditions. And owner occupation, astonishingly, really, under a Tory government, for which it should be a priority, it is a priority for us, is also going down. So you've got to deal with all of those issues, but there is a way of doing it. And the way of doing it is, firstly, you have to allow councils to borrow, you have to actually build social housing units, and you have to have schemes to allow access to home ownership. So that could be, for example, what the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan's London Living Rent scheme is, which means that you're renting at only a certain proportion of your income, maximum a third, gives the opportunity to save up, it gives the opportunity after a period of years to buy into and then buy the property you're renting, or to save for a property elsewhere, as well as addressing the insecurity in the private rented sector by having longer term tenancies with rent controls within those tenancies. Now I've rushed through those answers, but you can see from that there is a real opportunity to do things, and we've just had a housing white paper that did nothing on any of those three areas of tenure.
Turning now to the specific issue of property being bought up across London in particular. You go around London, there are properties that just stand empty and they're just going up in value. How can Labour tackle that problem in particular to ensure that our homeless, first-time buyers can get on the housing property ladder instead of having these properties just standing empty?
Yeah, well, the problem of tenure and the problem of who is buying and for what reason is a relatively new one, and it's not just limited to London, but it's a particular London problem. It needs a particular London solution. Now, part of it is what Sadiq Khan, the mayor, has said, which is you have to have what Boris Johnson did not say you had to have, which is a sizable percentage, minimum 35, preferably 50%, of genuinely affordable housing in any one scheme. You have to try and diminish, even within the 50+% that is market housing, the opportunity for it to be used by developers to sell what are called safety deposit flats, i.e. flats that are sold abroad for investment or to squirrel money away, perhaps dirty money, which are never used at all, by making sure that options go first to buyers who are going to use them in that way. Actually, part of the solution is happening now because that market is collapsing. The sales in that market are at an all-time low, and in new developments they're selling perhaps 1 or 2 flats a month. Now that's a problem for the developer. How that's going to be resolved, I don't know, but we already have the problem of the wrong type of accommodation being built. Lots of small, very expensive, high-rise, 1 and 2 bedroom flats are not meeting the demands of Londoners. So yes, again, there are solutions, but they need to be implemented quickly.
Turning now to the Labour Party, what would you say is Labour's biggest problem today?
I think that the Labour Party, the first problem is being honest about the fact that we are not in a good place now, and that has come about by a series of events, some of which have been without our control, some of which have been within our control. So I think you have to first of all analyse the situation as it is, and the problem really is that we are not relevant to a large part of the people we would expect to be voting for us. It's not universally true, obviously, and in some parts of the country, London's a good example, we are still doing very well. But it's clear, and we may see this in some of the election results coming up, particularly in the spring with the local results, that people are not making that link. And that's a fundamental problem for a political party, because the brand loyalty has gone to all parties now. You have to be selling something to people that they want to buy. Now, I can give you my ideas on what I think that should be, but other people's ideas might be more relevant than mine. But in the end, we have to make that connection with our electorate, which, like any other electorate for any other major party, is a coalition of interests. So it's not an easy thing to do, but if you lose that connection with your core electorate, then you clearly are in a bad place.
A lot of people are saying now that the traditional alliance between our working class and our middle class voters is breaking down. What does this mean for the party, and how can we reconcile it?
Well, I don't think that that is necessarily a fatal problem. As I've said, all parties are a coalition of interests, and the Labour Party, when it was formed, was a coalition between trade union movement, parts of the working class, socialist intellectuals, and they've all rubbed along together pretty well, and within the party structure, within the membership, is at an all-time high. That still works. This issue of relevance is as relevant wherever you come along that spectrum. There are some issues on social justice and on fairness on which that whole coalition will be together, and there are some where you have to appeal to certain, either in a regional way or on a basis of class, on the basis of a background. You have to be offering something that way. In that sense, all manifestos are a shopping basket, which some people, nobody's going to buy into all of it. I don't see that as the primary problem that you have a coalition of disparate interests. It will be amazing if you could win an election in this country without doing that. It's how you both have those underlying themes that appeal generally across the board, which is true on the left or on the right, different themes, but also how you can appeal to those core elements within your support.
Jeremy's standing in the polls is very low. In 2016, he resigned from your shadow post. How do you think Jeremy's doing now?
Well, you're right to say that I didn't support Jeremy in the leadership elections, but I respect the results of those leadership elections, and Jeremy's the leader, and I think Jeremy will be the leader now for as long as he wants to be, up until an election, and then on the outcome of that election we will see what happens. So really the question isn't for me, it's for him. I can say hand on heart that yes, I accept the outcome of that election. I'm serving in his shadow government and doing that to the best of my ability. But the sort of big ticket issues that you've been asking me about, they're the questions that Jeremy now has to answer, which is how do we ensure that we are ahead in the polls? How do we ensure that we are winning the electoral cycles as they come round in that way? So yes, he deserves the right to lead because he won the election, but now he's got to answer those difficult questions.
And if a Labour majority at the next election doesn't look plausible, would you be willing to seek an electoral alliance to deny the Tories a majority? Would you be happy, for instance, working with the Lib Dems or the Greens in the next Parliament?
I think, particularly all the time that we have a first past the post system, that you just have to play the hand you're dealt after an election. That was certainly true in 2010, and the Liberals had to then make a decision. Some would say that they didn't have that choice, that it was difficult to construct any alliance other than the one that they did. But I don't think there's very much merit at all in thinking about these things ahead of time, for two reasons. Firstly, you have to put all your enthusiasm and effort into your own platform and ensuring that you do the best you can there. But secondly, after an election has happened, you then have to look around for how everybody else has done. So yes, obviously it is more likely that we will go into a coalition with other left of centre parties than with the Conservatives, but equally there's some lack of trust, I think, with the Lib Dems in particular, because of the way that they behaved in the coalition. It was a strange experience for me, who doesn't have much experience in my own constituency of Lib Dems, to be attacked from the left by them for my first 5 years in Parliament and then see them supporting a very right-wing Tory government after that. I think the ball is in their court to prove themselves again. They can do it perhaps on issues like Europe, but I think it will take a lot to trust them again.
Do you think that issue of Europe is a particular strength for the Liberal Democrats, particularly in London, which of course voted overwhelmingly to remain in the European Union?
I'm not so sure it is, partly because they are so weak as a party anyway, that really they can't, until they've established themselves from the ground upwards again, nobody can take much notice of anything they say. Also, the Labour Party is a pro-European party. It may be arguing now for the best Brexit deal, with a substantial minority like myself arguing that Brexit's still a bad idea, but it's a strong voice. The Liberals are themselves not united on this. 2 or 3 of their 9 MPs are very reluctant anti-Brexiteers because I think of their constituencies. So no, I don't think that's going to give them. I can see why they're trying to use it as a hook to pull more votes into their rather small basket at the moment. But I think people will also see that for what it is.
And then we must talk about Donald Trump. What's your single biggest fear and your single biggest cause for hope under his presidency?
Well, I don't want to dodge the question, but my single biggest hope is that he gets bored with it and clears off somewhere else. I don't mean that's literally, but effectively he delegates the power that he has to people who are, shall we say, slightly more orthodox in the way that they use that power, because I think he's a menace in every sense of the word. The fear is that he will continue in the vein he is at the moment, which is showing no understanding at all of the office that he's won, i.e. that he will govern by Twitter, that he will be completely capricious, that he will make arbitrary decisions, that he will make stupid appointments, and he will run the most powerful country in the world like a game show, or like his property empire at best, in that way. I think that's really dangerous. Now people will say there's a military danger there, there's an economic danger. I think it's a danger across the board. And you've seen in the steps that he's taken, even in his first few weeks in power, that he's not afraid to take those crass steps. So I hope, I think I would be kidding myself and probably everyone watching this if I thought he's suddenly going to become a responsible, a moderate and considered leader. So I hope that, as I say, he's just going to lose some interest and let wiser people take over.
So if there was one issue that the Labour Party should be talking about more or emphasising more, what would you say that would be?
I think we have to talk more about the economy. And by that, I don't mean in a rarefied way, a macro level, although we obviously clearly have to have policies on the area. We have to talk about, in terms of people's own economic security and their aspiration for themselves and their families, where the Labour Party would take the country if it won the next election. I think partly that's because people think it's an area that we're weak on, whereas actually, of course, in the past we have been a party that has delivered a sound and a strong economy for everyone, not just for people at the top. But it's also because I think we can recover trust, or we already have trust, on some of the, if you like, our stronger areas, on education, on health, on housing. There's a lot to do and to say, and of course we should say that, but a lot of those things don't work unless people feel they have the economic security and they feel they have a government that is driving the economy as a whole forward. So that, I think, is where we have to put our effort in.
So what would you like to see happen on the business rate rise?
I think, and I'm not saying this just because I'm a London MP, that it needs to be rethought. That if we're not going to scrap it altogether, then there has to be substantial transitional protection and there has to be a review as far as it affects small businesses. I think there's already a realisation that the government shot itself in the foot here because it's giving the Amazons and the Sports Directs and the people who are out of town and are the big players big cuts, while people who are trying to run small independent businesses in city centres are getting massive rises that's going to drive them into bankruptcy. But it's a particular problem for London. And I think in this respect, as in many others, London becomes the sacrificial lamb here. Oh, everyone in London's wealthy. London gets all the resources. Well, London is a major driver of the economy, but that's true. And that, for example, is why we have a lot of infrastructure spending in London, because that's where people live, where they want to live, and what's producing the wealth of the country. But not everybody in London is wealthy. And that's particularly true of the small business sector, which is 90% of business. So I think we need to take a step back, not play to the gallery in terms of saying, playing one region off against the other. But this is a really immediate problem that if it's not resolved in the next few weeks is going to lead firms, and I'm not talking about, as I say, successful businesses that are turning over millions of pounds. I'm talking about businesses, family businesses, places like Shepherd's Bush Market in my constituency. They're an essential and vibrant part of the community which aren't going to survive if they have to put up with massive increases in rates.